Okay, we have looked recently at the idea of the body, and we've mentioned that teachers are a part of the body. So today I want to look at what happens when the idea is forgotten, both by the teacher and by the one being taught. We see in Yeshua's day, he addressed teachers wanting to be seen to be wise, perhaps, among men. He addressed the Pharisees and how they wanted the adulation of men, the recognition of men for what they did. In all of this, that we need to remember that it is not the teacher who is wise or who is anything special. It is rather Yehovah who gives the teacher what to teach by his spirit that is important. We see in Matthew 23, when Yeshua is addressing the Pharisees, he says, "And they do all their works to be seen by men, and they make their tefillin wide, and lengthen the tzitzit of their garments, and they love the best places at feasts, and the best seats in the congregations." So they were not teaching, and they were not operating their role within the body in order to give glory to Yehovah, or in order to help people, to teach them in Yehovah's ways. Rather, they did what they did to be seen by men. They wanted the recognition of men. They loved the best places at feasts, for example, and the best seats in the congregation. They love to be seen as important. Yeshua told a parable about choosing the best seats. In Luke 14, it says he spoke a parable to those who were invited when he noted how they chose the best places, saying to them, "When you are invited by anyone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the best place, lest one more distinguished than you be invited by him, and he who invited you and him come and say to you, 'Give this one place,' and then you begin with shame to take the last place. Rather, when you are invited, go and sit down in the last place, so that when he who invited you comes, he shall say to you, 'Friend, come up higher.' Then you shall have esteem in the presence of those who sit at the table with you. For everyone who is exalting himself shall be humbled, and he who is humbling himself shall be exalted." So Yeshua identifies the problem here as being exalting oneself. The humble accept the lower places. They don't seek the best places. The Pharisees were not so. They loved the best places at the feasts, and people like that will be humbled according to Yeshua. It is better that they take a more lowly position, and then the Father can exalt them in due time. So continuing on, it says they love the greetings in the marketplaces and to be called by men, "Rabbi, Rabbi." So they loved the idea of having the position of teacher because of the recognition, the adulation that it brought from other men who didn't understand that they just had a role within the body. But you, do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Messiah, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in the heavens. Neither be called leaders, for one is your leader, the Messiah. So let's not misunderstand what this is saying. It's not saying don't be called teacher, don't be called father, and don't be called leader. If that is what Yeshua was teaching, he would be teaching against the word of Elohim. We see in 2 Chronicles 30, the Levites have good understanding concerning Yehovah, and the Levites taught Israel. That is what their role was. We see in Leviticus 10, Yehovah spoke to Aaron, and he said, do not drink wine or strong drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of appointment, lest you die, a law forever throughout your generations. So as to make a distinction between the set apart and the profane, between the unclean and the clean, and to teach the children of Israel all the laws which Jehovah has spoken to them by the hand of Moshe. So Yehovah himself instructed them to be teachers. So what Yeshua was not doing is contradicting him. He is not saying something opposite to the Word. He was the Word made flesh. Similarly, respect your father and your mother. So if Yeshua was saying don't be called father in the literal sense, don't ever be called father, or don't call anyone father, he would be contradicting the Torah. In Numbers 2, it says, and Yehovah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, saying, the children of Israel are to camp each one by his banner beside the sign of his father's house. Let them camp around the tent of appointment at a distance. And on the east side, towards sunrise, those of the banner of the camp of Yehudah camp according to their divisions, and the leader of the children of Yehudah, Nachshon, son of Aminadab. So Yehovah appointed leaders. We also see reference there, of course, to their father's house. So how are we to understand what Yeshua is telling us? Yeshua is saying, rather than look to men for these roles, look to Yehovah ultimately for these roles. Someone can teach you what Yehovah says, but they cannot teach you apart from Yehovah. Someone can be your father on the earth, but you don't look to them over Yehovah. Somebody can be your leader, but they can't lead you apart from Yehovah to something different. It is ultimately to Yehovah that we look. Matthew 23:11-12 said, the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted, as we saw in the parable. So all of this is to do with either exalting oneself, everything the Pharisees did, in wanting the greetings in the markets to be called rabbi by men. They wanted that position. They wanted to exalt themselves and to be exalted by other people. But Yeshua instructs us that if we want to truly be great, then we should serve other people, something that presumably would not have been of interest to the Pharisees, who wanted rather to be served by other men. But Yeshua flips that on its head and says, no, if you want to be great in the kingdom, great in the body, then you must serve other people. So when we're looking for teachers, we look to those who serve, those who are humble, not those who want to be seen as wise or seen as possessing knowledge that the other people don't. We must look to them as members of the body. They are brothers. We don't look to put them on a pedestal. We recognize where they are within the body, but that they are the body. They're just another part of the body. Peter gives us some insight as to what that should look like. He says, therefore, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Messiah, and also a sharer of the esteem that is to be revealed, I appeal to the elders among you. Shepherd the flock of Elohim which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but voluntarily, not out of greed for filthy gain, but eagerly, neither as being masters over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. So that's what it should look like to be a leader, to be an example, not as someone who rules over the other members of the body, someone who serves the other members, and somebody who does not rule over them. It's not a position of it's not a position in which you are ruling the people. It's a position in which you certainly make decisions, and you certainly are in charge of the people, but you're in charge of the people in order to serve them, not as a ruler. 2 Timothy 4:2-3 warns us about how people, we can see the people are. We've discussed this before as people choosing the body rather than allowing Yehovah to choose people's functions in the body. It says, proclaim the word, be urgent in season, out of season, convict, warn, appeal with all patience and teaching. So that's how a teacher should be. For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teaching, but according to their own desires they shall heap up for themselves teachers, tickling the ear. And it should be no surprise for us that people are like that. People have been like that since Israel were freed from Egypt. Numbers 14:4 says, they said to each other, let us appoint a leader, and let us turn back to Mitzrayim. So we should bear in mind that it is Yehovah who makes somebody a teacher. It's not something that people do for themselves in order to get recognition and adulation from men, and it is not something that we as his body can appoint someone to and say, you will be our teacher. In all things we should seek to submit to Yehovah and those whom he appoints as teachers. Maybe that's going to take some discretion on our part. It's going to take discernment on our part to discern those whom Yehovah has appointed. So the whole point is that it is Yehovah teaching through that person. You don't call anyone a leader or a teacher apart from Yehovah. The whole point is that it is Yehovah doing it by the hand of that person. So we saw in Leviticus 10, Yehovah has spoken these things by the hand of Moshe. It wasn't Moshe's law, it was Yehovah's law spoken to them by the hand of Moshe. We see Judah sending the young goat by the hand of his friend. So we can see that someone can do something by the hand of another person. We see in Exodus 16, if only we had died by the hand of Yehovah. So Yehovah can do things directly. He can also do things by the hand of another, and teachers are to teach, but be Yehovah teaching by the hand of another. We see in Exodus 35, which Yehovah by the hand of Moshe had commanded to be done in Numbers 10, according to the mouth of Yehovah by the hand of Moshe. So this is how teaching should be. So it's really important not to ascribe to the one speaking anything. Yehovah can speak by the hands of somebody. He can speak via a donkey if he wants. You certainly don't accredit the donkey as having any wisdom or anything like that. And it's easy for people to do that. We see this happen in the book of Acts. In Acts 14, 8-18, it says, "And in Lystra there was a certain man disabled in his feet, a cripple from his mother's womb, who had never walked. This one heard Paul speaking, who, looking intently at him, and seeing that he had belief or faith to be healed, said with a loud voice, 'Stand upright on your feet.' And he sprang up and began to walk. And when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they lifted up their voices, saying in Lycaonian, 'The gods have become like men and have come down to us.' And they called Barnabas Zeus and Paul Hermes, since he was the chief speaker. And the priest of Zeus, being in front of their city, brought oxen and wreaths to the gates, and wished to offer with the crowds. And when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard this, they tore their garments and ran in among the crowds, crying out and saying, 'Men, why are you doing this? We also are men with the same nature as you, bringing to you the good news, to turn from these worthless matters to the living Elohim, who made the heaven and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, who in past generations allowed all the nations to walk in their own ways, though indeed he did not leave himself without witness, doing good, giving us rain from heaven and fruit-bearing seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness.' Even with these words, they still had difficulty in stopping the crowds from offering to them. And I think that this is something that is easier for us to comprehend when we see people in reality doing something. It's easier for us to comprehend that it is them doing it than that it is Yehovah by their hand doing something. The same is true with our teachings. It's easy to look at our teachings and say, well, they are amazing. And we would agree, we think that our teachings are amazing in so much as we are amazed at them. We look at our teachings and we say, these are incredible, not because we are incredible, because Yehovah is incredible. Charlie and I made a list of the teachings that Yehovah has given us, and there's some really incredible things on there, things that we've never heard anyone else teach on, and that is not to say that we are amazing, it's to say that we are amazed by Yehovah's mercy in leading his people to truth. That's the way that it works. The people that he appoints as teachers, he teaches by their hand. So we don't think anything of ourselves in having taught these things. We think of Yehovah. The list that we made, tongues being tunava, which is the Hebrew word translated as prophesy, really it is to speak in the Spirit, and we see people in the Old Testament doing this too, or in the Tanakh doing this too. The red heifer sacrifice, Yeshua being the red heifer, allowing our temples to be cleansed, to allow the Ruach to dwell in us. The Becker, or the head tax, Yeshua having paid the head tax at Golgotha, the place of the skull. The calendar, the months being determined not by the moon, which doesn't divide the year into 12, but by the stars. Offerings, or the temples, spiritual offerings, the 3 temples, being born again of the Spirit, not being the Christian doctrine, but instead being when you are a spirit body and you are thus able to inherit the kingdom. Life after death, that your soul goes to Sheol and is either destroyed or is resurrected in your spirit body. The cause of Sara'at, commonly translated as leprosy, being disobedience to men of Elohim. The 4 baptisms, proper teaching on the tithe, beasts and kings, and what they actually are in the scriptures. The Atzarah, what that is, a mandatory gathering. The time of Jacob's trouble, which is commonly taught to be the end times, but it's actually Jacob or Israel being exiled. And the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees and Jasher, proper teaching about them and proper understanding on them. And we look at that list and we are amazed by all of the wisdom that is represented therein. We're amazed that Yehovah has allowed us to understand these things in order to be able to teach on them. 1 Corinthians 1:11-17, we see that this ascribing of things to people rather than Yehovah is something that is common among people. For I've been informed concerning you, my brothers, by those of the house of Chloe, that there are strifes among you. What I mean is this, that each one of you says, I am of Paul, or I am of Apollos, or I am of Peter, or I am of Messiah. Has the Messiah been divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? I thank Elohim that I baptized not one of you except Crispus and Gaius, that no one should say that I baptized into my own name. Now I did also baptize the household of Stephanus. For the rest, I do not know whether I baptized anyone else. For Messiah did not send me to baptize, but to bring the good news, not with the wisdom of words, that the cross of Messiah should not be nullified. So Paul is saying, look, this isn't me, this is of Messiah. You need to understand that you're not baptized by Paul into the name of Paul. All of it comes from Yehovah. All of it is of Messiah. It's Messiah who died for you. It's Messiah who did the work. All that Paul was an apostle who was sent to preach the good news to the lost. The same is true of me and Charlie. We are just mouthpieces for Yehovah. There is nothing that comes from us. We are teaching his word. We are teaching his wisdom, not ours. You should call no man teacher. The wisdom comes from Yehovah. He operates in his body as he will. He chooses the parts of his body. We don't choose them for ourselves. The most that could be said of me and Charlie is that we are submissive to Yehovah. We allow him to do the work, and that is a good thing in any part of his body. But the wisdom that we teach is not our wisdom. No one should call us the teacher. It is Yehovah and his Spirit. 1 Thessalonians 5:12-13 says, But brothers, we beg you to know those who labor among you and are over you in the Master and admonish you. So we will see here that it is important to recognize those parts of the body who do teaching, and to hold them in the highest regard and love because of their work, not because of them, because of the work that they do. That's why you hold them in high regard, because they are teaching the wisdom of Yehovah. Be at peace among yourselves. So it's very easy for us to ascribe to men what is from Yehovah, but that is certainly a mistake. We should recognize the order of things. We should recognize that these things come from Yehovah, and we should give him the glory. It's easy to recognize that in your mind and to say that that is true, but to really internalize that and for that to be your understanding of things is not something that comes naturally. What comes naturally is for us to look at the world around us and to think that things in the world around us arise from the world around us, rather than really internalizing that they come from Yehovah. An example of this would be Joshua and Caleb. Yehovah said to Joshua, "This day I begin to make you great before the eyes of all Israel, so that they know that I am with you as I was with Moshe." It would be foolishness, of course, to look at Joshua and Caleb and to say, "Look at these great giant slayers, the slayers of giant men," and not to see that it was Yehovah who gave the victory to them, who made Joshua great in the eyes of Israel, in order for them to see that Yehovah was with Joshua, not for Joshua to be great and stand apart on his own. In Genesis, we see Noah. It would of course be foolishness for Noah's sons and his sons' wives to say, "Wow, Dad really saved us from the flood." It was Dad who allowed us to live on the earth and to be safe because he built the ark, and not to ascribe that to Yehovah, who told Noah all of this so that Noah could save his family. Yehovah willing, I'll see you next week.